The knock came just as Wyatt reached for the latch to bolt the door. He froze, hearing it again through the wind, and wondered who would risk the storm, and what kind of trouble would follow them inside. Snow drove sideways across the porch, hissing against the wood like it had teeth. Wyatt stood there, hand still on the iron latch, not opening it, not walking away. Behind him, the fire cracked low, and Sadie shifted under her blanket. The knock came again, steady this time, not desperate, just certain. When he opened the door, the wind rushed in hard enough to push him back half a step. She didn't speak right away, just stood there, holding her ground in a dress that had seen too many roads. No pleading, no apology. Wyatt didn't move to let her in. Not yet. Because out here, a man learned quick. Some choices didn't stop at the door. Would you have opened it? Or left it closed? Stay with me and tell me what you would have done. Snow came down in thick, steady sheets over Red Mesa. The kind that swallowed sound and blurred the world into shades of white and gray. The wind pushed against the Colson cabin like it had something to prove, slipping through every crack it could find. Inside, the fire burned low but steady, casting a soft glow across rough wood walls and a table marked by years of use. Wyatt Colson stood by the door, one hand resting against the frame, listening. He had heard it once already. A knock. Faint. Almost lost in the storm. He waited. The second knock came harder this time. Not loud, just certain. Behind him, a small voice stirred. "Papa?" Sadie sat up from her blanket by the fire, her hair tangled from sleep, eyes still heavy but searching. Wyatt didn't turn right away. His gaze stayed on the door. "Stay there," he said quietly. He lifted the latch. The wind pushed in first, sharp and cold, carrying snow across the threshold. It hit his coat, his face, the floorboards. Then he saw her. A woman stood on the porch, half buried in drifting snow. Her coat was thin, worn at the edges. The hem of her dress was stiff with ice. One hand clutched a small cloth bag, the other hung at her side, fingers red from the cold. She didn't step forward, didn't bow her head. "Mr. Colson?" Her voice came low, steady despite the wind. "Eliza May Brooks." That was all she offered. Wyatt took her in without speaking. The patched sleeves, the shoes wrapped in strips of cloth, the way she held herself upright even as the storm leaned into her. This wasn't what he'd pictured, not even close. He had imagined someone prepared, practical, maybe a little worn from travel, but not like this. Not someone who looked like the storm had taken more from her than it had given. The wind howled again, louder now, pushing snow past his boots and into the house. Wyatt didn't move. For a long moment, neither did she. Then Sadie slipped past him. "Papa, she's cold." The girl didn't wait for permission. She reached for Eliza's hand, small fingers wrapping around one that looked too numb to feel it. Eliza's eyes flickered then, just for a second, down at the child. Sadie tugged gently. "Come on, it's warmer inside." Wyatt opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Eliza stepped forward. Snow fell from her shoulders as she crossed the threshold. It melted quickly on the floorboards, leaving dark marks that spread like ink. She didn't look around much, just moved where Sadie led her, stopping near the fire. The door stayed open behind them. Wyatt turned and shut it with a firm push. The latch clicked into place. The wind dulled at once, reduced to a low, steady pressure against the walls. Inside it was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. Eliza stood near the fire, hands held just close enough to catch the heat without touching it. Steam rose faintly from her sleeves. She didn't shiver, not that Wyatt could see. Sadie dragged a chair closer. Sit here. Papa made the fire big tonight. Eliza lowered herself carefully, like she was making sure not to leave too much behind. She set the cloth bag by her feet. Her fingers lingered on it for a second before letting go. Wyatt stayed by the door. He watched the way she sat, straight-backed, still. Not a word of complaint, not a glance around the room like she was measuring it. Just there. You came from the station? He asked finally. She nodded once. Last wagon before the pass closed. No extra words, no story offered. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. The stubble there scratched against his palm. Road's bad tonight. I noticed. Something in the way she said it, not dry, not sharp, just plain, made him look at her again. Sadie had found a cup, the chipped blue one that used to sit by the stove. She poured coffee with both hands, careful not to spill, then carried it over. This one's warm, she said, holding it out. Eliza took it with both hands. Her fingers wrapped around the cup slowly, like she was remembering what warmth felt like. Thank you. Sadie smiled and sat cross-legged on the floor beside her. Wyatt stepped forward at last. Not close, just enough to feel the heat from the fire. He looked down at the wet marks on the floor, then at the snow still clinging to Eliza's skirt. You can dry your things by the stove, he said. I will, she answered. Again, nothing more. No apology, no explanation. Wyatt let out a slow breath. His eyes moved over her once more. The patches, the careful stitching, the way every tear had been mended instead of hidden. He had asked for a wife. What stood in his house looked like someone who had fought to get there, and hadn't lost yet. Sadie leaned against Eliza's knee, already settling like she belonged there. Eliza didn't move away. One hand hovered for a moment, then rested lightly on the child's shoulder. Wyatt noticed that. He noticed everything. Outside, the storm pressed on, snow piling against the porch, wind testing the walls again and again. Inside, the fire cracked softly. Eliza lifted the cup to her lips. Steam touched her face. For a brief second, her eyes closed. Then she opened them again and met Wyatt's. He didn't look away right off. There was something there he hadn't expected. Not fear, not pleading, just steadiness. He shifted his weight, the floorboard creaking under his boot. Spare rooms down the hall, he said. You can rest there. She nodded. Thank you. Sadie looked up at him. Can she stay, Papa? The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Wyatt glanced at the door, at the snow pressing against it from the outside, then back at the two of them. She'll stay tonight, he said. Sadie grinned, satisfied. Eliza didn't react much, just lowered her gaze to the cup again. But Wyatt caught it, the smallest pause in her shoulders, like something had been held tight and eased, just a fraction. The fire popped, a log shifted. And in that cabin, where silence had lived for too long, something else had stepped in with the storm. Wyatt turned away first. He reached for another piece of wood, set it on the fire, and watched the flames catch. Behind him, he could hear Sadie talking softly, asking questions, getting short, patient answers in return. The wind kept going, but it didn't feel as loud anymore. Morning came slow over Red Mesa. The storm had settled into a quiet white blanket, thick against the fences and piled high along the corral gate. The sky hung low and pale, like it hadn't decided whether to clear or keep holding the cold. Wyatt was up before first light. He moved through the cabin without a sound, pulled on his coat, checked the stove, stepped outside to break the ice in the water trough with the back of an axe. The horses shifted in their stalls, breath rising in steady clouds. Everything felt the same. Except it wasn't. When he came back in, he stopped just inside the door. The fire had been built up again. Not big, not wasteful, just right. A kettle sat over it, already steaming. The table had been cleared of last night's things, wiped down clean with a damp cloth that now hung over the chair to dry. Eliza stood by the window, tying back a loose strip of fabric where the draft had been slipping through. Her sleeves were rolled. Her movements were quiet, sure. She didn't turn when he entered. "Coffee's ready," she said. Wyatt took a step forward, then another. He poured himself a cup. The handle was warm, the kind of warm that comes from being held, not just poured. He glanced at her hands. They moved quick, but careful, fingers steady, not the kind that hesitated. Sadie shuffled out from the back room, dragging her blanket behind her. She blinked at the light, then at Eliza. "You're still here," she said, like she needed to hear it out loud. Eliza looked over, just a small turn of her head. "I said I would be." Sadie nodded, satisfied. She dropped her blanket and went straight to the table. Wyatt watched that. He drank his coffee slow. Let the silence settle where it wanted. Later that morning, he found Eliza out near the small pen behind the barn. One of the geldings had been favoring its leg the night before. Wyatt had meant to take a look after breakfast. He leaned against the fence now, arms resting on the top rail, and watched. Eliza didn't notice him. She had the horse's leg lifted, her shoulder pressed lightly against its side. The animal shifted once, then stilled under her hand. She ran her fingers along the swollen joint, pressing gently, feeling for something deeper than the surface. "Easy," she murmured. "I know." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Wyatt's eyes narrowed slightly. She set the leg down and reached into her bag, pulled out a small tin, dented at the corners, opened it. The smell of something sharp and clean carried faintly through the cold air. She worked without asking. No glance toward the house. No hesitation. Wyatt pushed off the fence and stepped closer, boots crunching over the frozen ground. She looked up then, only for a second. "Swelling set in," she said, "but it hasn't turned bad yet." Wyatt folded his arms. "You've done this before." "Yes." That was all. He looked at the horse, then back at her. "You should have said something. You were busy." It wasn't said as an excuse, just a fact. He nodded once, slow. Sadie came running up from behind the barn, her boots too big, her steps uneven but determined. "What are you doing?" she asked, breathless. "Helping your horse," Eliza said. Sadie beamed. "She's not my horse. Papa says I gotta earn one first." Eliza's mouth moved just a little, not quite a smile. "Then we'll keep this one sound until you do." Sadie stepped closer, watching every move. "Can you show me?" Eliza shifted slightly, making space without making a show of it. "You hold here," she said, guiding the girl's hand to the horse's neck. "Keep him steady." Sadie did. Wyatt stood there longer than he meant to. That evening, Mrs. Klein came by. She didn't knock hard, just enough to be heard. Wyatt opened the door to find her standing stiff in her coat, lips pressed thin. "I heard you had company," she said, peering past him. Wyatt stepped aside just enough for her to see inside. Eliza was at the table, folding a piece of cloth with slow, careful movements. She didn't stop, didn't look up right away. Mrs. Klein's eyes moved over her, took in the dress, the mended seams, the way she held herself. "Well," she said after a moment, "that's something." Wyatt didn't answer. Mrs. Klein nodded once, like she'd made up her mind about something she hadn't said out loud. Then she turned and left, her boots crunching sharp in the snow. The door closed again. Night settled early. Sadie sat by the fire with a small primer book, sounding out letters under her breath. Eliza sat across from her, guiding when needed, letting silence do most of the work. Wyatt stayed near the back wall, repairing a broken hinge with slow, measured taps of his hammer. At some point, he noticed the scratching sound. He looked up. Eliza had a small notebook open on the table, a stub of pencil in her hand. She wrote with steady strokes, each line clean and even, not hurried, not uncertain. Wyatt's eyes lingered there. Then she felt it. She closed the notebook. Not quick. Not guilty. Just done. Their eyes met for a brief moment across the room. Wyatt looked away first. He set the hammer down, reached for another nail he didn't need yet. The fire popped, sending a brief spray of sparks up the chimney. Sadie leaned against the table, her voice soft, as she tried another word. "Home," she said, careful and proud. Eliza nodded once. "That's right." Wyatt stood there, the nail still between his fingers. He looked at the closed notebook, then at her hands, and something settled in his chest. Not heavy, not light, just different. He hadn't asked who she really was, not yet. But he knew one thing now. She wasn't what she looked like, not even close. Wyatt carried that thought with him all the way into town. The road from Red Mesa cut through low hills packed hard with snow, the wagon wheels grinding slow over frozen ruts. The sky had cleared overnight, leaving the air sharp and bright. Every sound carried farther in the cold. He kept his collar up and his eyes forward. Didn't rush, didn't linger. Town came into view the same as always. A line of buildings crouched against the wind. The general store with its crooked sign. The blacksmith's shed breathing smoke into the sky. A few men standing outside, hands deep in their coats, watching the road out of habit more than interest. Wyatt pulled the wagon to a stop near the post rail. "Morning?" someone said. He nodded once. Inside the store, the warmth hit him first. Then the smell. Coffee, leather, dry grain. Mr. Ellery stood behind the counter, pencil tucked behind his ear, ledger open in front of him. Wyatt set a short list down. Flour, salt, kerosene. Ellery glanced at it, then at him. "Storm treat you all right?" "Held." Ellery made a mark in his book. Didn't ask more. It wasn't Ellery who did. "You took her in?" The voice came from behind Wyatt. He didn't turn right away. Just stood there, hands resting on the edge of the counter. "Didn't figure you for that kind of man," the voice went on. Wyatt turned then. Caleb Durney leaned against a barrel of feed, one boot hooked over the rim. Big man. Bigger voice. The kind that filled a room even when he wasn't trying. "What kind's that?" Wyatt asked. Durney shrugged. "The kind that brings trouble home." A couple of men nearby shifted, pretending not to listen. Wyatt picked up his list again, folded it once. "Bought a service, same as anyone." Durney's mouth pulled slightly to one side. "That's so." He let it hang there, then added, "You know her name's been around before." That got Wyatt's attention. "Where?" he asked. Durney didn't answer right off, just looked toward the stove where Sheriff Harlan sat, boots stretched out, hat tipped low. Wyatt followed the glance. The sheriff didn't move much, just lifted his head enough to meet Wyatt's eyes. "Kansas," he said. One word. Flat. Wyatt stepped closer. "What about it?" Harlan rubbed a thumb along his jaw. "Nothing written down here. Just heard things. Name came up in a case. Woman died. Folks argued about who was to blame." Silence settled around them. Wyatt felt it press in, same as the storm had the night before. Gurney pushed off the barrel. Point is, you don't know what you brought through your door. Wyatt's jaw tightened. I know enough. Do you? That question didn't come loud. Didn't need to. Wyatt picked up his supplies without another word, paid in coin, took the receipt Ellery slid across the counter, folded it without looking. He walked out into the cold again. The air hit harder this time. On the ride back, the road seemed longer. The wagon creaked. The reins sat heavy in his hands. The horses moved steady, breath rising in slow, even clouds. Wyatt didn't think in words. He saw things. Eliza's hands on the horse's leg. The way she held that cup by the fire. The way she closed that notebook. Kansas. A woman dead. He shifted in his seat. Didn't turn the wagon around. Didn't speed up either. By the time he reached the cabin, the sun had dropped low enough to stretch long shadows across the snow. The door opened before he could knock the ice off his boots. Sadie stood there. You're back. He nodded. She stepped aside, but her eyes searched his face a second longer than usual. Inside, the fire was going. The table set, plates laid out straight, not perfect, but careful. Eliza stood by the stove, stirring something in a pot. She didn't turn right away. Wyatt set the supplies down near the wall. Town was quiet? She asked. He shrugged off his coat. Enough? She nodded, kept stirring. No questions. That bothered him more than if she had asked. They ate in near silence. Sadie talked at first. About a word she learned. About the way the horse didn't limp anymore. About how she'd folded 2 shirts all by herself. Wyatt listened, answered when needed. Eliza said little. After the meal, Wyatt stayed at the table longer than usual. Eliza cleared dishes without asking him to move. Their hands came close once, not touching, just near enough to notice. He pulled his hand back first. Later, when the fire burned low and Sadie had gone to bed, Wyatt stepped out onto the porch. The night was clear, stars sharp above the ridge. He stood there a while, then came back in. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. He moved down the hall, stopped just short of Sadie's door. Inside, voices, soft. Miss Eliza? A pause. Yes, honey. You gonna leave? Wyatt's hand tightened against the wall. No answer came right away. Sadie's voice again, smaller this time. Like Mama did? The words sat in the dark. Wyatt didn't move. Inside the room, he heard the shift of blankets, the soft creak of the bed. Then Eliza's voice, lower now. I'm here tonight. Nothing more. No promise. No lie. Wyatt closed his eyes for a second, then stepped back. He didn't go in, didn't let them know he'd been there. He walked past the door, out to the main room, picked up his coat again. The cold outside hit him full in the chest. He didn't mind it. Not this time. It felt closer to something he understood. The cold held steady through the night. By morning, the sky had gone hard and blue, the kind that made every sound carry too far. Wyatt was already out by the barn when he heard the rider. Fast, not reckless, just urgent. He turned as the horse came up through the gate, foam at its mouth, sides heaving. A boy sat in the saddle, barely holding on. Mr. Colson, the boy called, voice breaking. We need help. Wyatt stepped forward and caught the reins before the horse could veer. Easy, he said, steadying both of them. What happened? It's Tommy Gurney, the boy said, sliding down too fast and nearly losing his footing. He fell, hit bad. They can't stop the bleeding. Wyatt's jaw tightened. Gurney. He glanced once toward the house, then back at the boy. Get him inside. Keep him warm." The boy hesitated. "They said—" He stopped himself. "They said to fetch anyone who knew what to do." Wyatt didn't answer. He turned and headed for the cabin. The door opened before he reached it. Eliza stood there, already wrapped in a shawl, her bag in hand. She didn't ask. "What do you need?" Wyatt said. "Hot water, clean cloth, needle and thread if you've got it." He nodded once and stepped aside. Inside, Sadie stood near the table, eyes wide. "What's happening?" Eliza moved past her, quick but calm. "A boy took a fall. I'm going to help." Sadie followed a step, then stopped when Wyatt's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "Stay here," he said. Eliza didn't look back. They rode out within minutes. The Durney place sat farther east, tucked low behind a rise where the wind cut sharp across open ground. By the time they arrived, 2 men were already outside, pacing. They stopped when they saw Wyatt. Then their eyes shifted to Eliza. No one said a word. Wyatt stepped down first. "Where is he?" "Inside," one of them said, then added, "Doc's not back from Prescott." Wyatt didn't wait. He pushed through the door. Eliza followed. The room was warm but tense. A boy lay on a narrow bed, pale, breathing shallow. Blood had soaked through the cloth tied around his leg. Caleb Durney stood at the far end of the room. His eyes met Wyatt's, then moved to Eliza. A long second passed. "She's with me," Wyatt said. That was all. Durney didn't argue. Eliza set her bag down and went straight to the boy. She peeled back the cloth, her hands steady even as fresh blood darkened the fabric beneath. "Hold him," she said, not looking up. Wyatt stepped forward without thinking. Took the boy's shoulders, firm but careful. The boy stirred, groaned. "Stay with me," Eliza said softly. "You hear me? Stay right here." She worked quick, cleaned the wound, pressed where it needed pressing. Her fingers moved like they'd done this before, many times, in worse places than this. No wasted motion, no panic. The room held its breath. At one point, the boy cried out. Wyatt tightened his grip, steadying him. Eliza didn't stop. Minutes stretched, then slowed, then changed. The bleeding eased, not gone, but no longer rushing. Eliza tied the bandage firm, sat back just a little. "He'll hold," she said. "Keep the leg raised. Don't let him walk." No one spoke. Caleb stepped closer, looked at his nephew, then at the woman who had just worked over him like it was second nature. "You done this before?" he said. Eliza wiped her hands on a cloth. "Yes." That was all she offered. Wyatt watched Durney's face. The shift there. Small, but real. The sheriff came in not long after, hat dusted with frost. He took one look at the boy, then at Eliza. "You're the one from Kansas," he said. The room tightened again. Eliza met his gaze, didn't move, didn't lower her eyes. "Yes." The sheriff stepped closer. "Heard about that case." Silence. Then he shook his head once. "Never sat right with me. Folks talked too much. Didn't listen enough." He looked at Wyatt. "Woman tried to save someone. Didn't make it. They needed someone to blame." Wyatt didn't answer. Didn't need to. He already knew what he was seeing. They rode back near dusk. The sky had gone soft again, streaks of pale light fading behind the ridge. Snow crunched under the horses' hooves, steady and slow. Eliza didn't speak. Neither did Wyatt. When they reached the cabin, she stepped down on her own, carried her bag inside without waiting. Wyatt stayed out a moment longer. He walked around the side of the house, stopped near the window. Inside, Eliza sat at the table, Her head had dipped forward. The notebook lay open under her hand. She had fallen asleep like that. No fire in her. No words. Just spent. Wyatt stood there a long time. The wind brushed past him, lighter now. He looked at her through the glass. At the woman who had come in rags. At the hands that had just held a life together. And for the first time he felt something shift that wasn't doubt. Something quieter. Something steadier. Inside, the fire burned low. Outside, Wyatt turned away from the window, but not from what he had seen. Morning came quiet. No wind this time. Just a thin crust of frost over everything, catching the light in pale silver. The kind of morning that made even small sounds feel like they mattered. Wyatt was already hitching the wagon when Eliza stepped out. She had cleaned up. Not new clothes, not anything different, just the same dress, brushed down, seams straightened, boots tied tighter. Her hair pulled back clean. She carried herself the same as always. Steady. Sadie came out behind her, pulling on her gloves. "Are we going to town?" Wyatt nodded once. "Church?" Sadie looked between them, then climbed up into the wagon without another question. Eliza hesitated just a moment. Not long. Then she stepped up on her own. Wyatt took the reins. The road into town felt shorter this time. Snow had begun to soften along the edges. The wagon wheels cut through it easier, leaving darker tracks behind. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin lines. Bells from the small church carried faint through the cold air. People were already gathering when they arrived. Boots on packed ground, voices low, heads turning as the wagon came into view. Wyatt didn't slow. He brought the horses to a stop, climbed down, and reached up to help Sadie first. Then he stepped back. Eliza didn't wait for his hand. She stepped down on her own. That didn't go unnoticed. They walked toward the church together. Not close, not far apart either. Sadie between them, holding on to both of their sleeves like she was making sure neither would drift. The doors opened. Warmth spilled out. And silence. Not full silence. Just that shift. The kind that comes when people stop talking all at once. Wyatt felt it land on his shoulders. He kept walking. Inside, benches filled slowly. Coats hung over backs. Hats held in hands. Eyes moved, then looked away, then moved back again. They took a place near the middle. Sadie slid in first. Eliza sat beside her. Wyatt took the edge. The service went on. Words were spoken. Songs were sung. Wyatt heard none of it clearly. Just the rhythm. Just the sound. When it ended, people stood, moved, turned. And then it came. Caleb Durney stepped forward. No anger in his face, no smile either. Just something settled, something decided. "You're keeping her," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. Not a question. A statement. Wyatt didn't answer right away. He looked at Eliza. She stood straight, hands at her sides, not clenched, not shaking. Just there. She didn't speak. Didn't look at the floor. Didn't look away. Wyatt took one step forward. Boot against wood. Sound carried. He faced Durney, then the rest of them. "She stays," he said. That was it at first. A murmur moved through the room. Durney held his ground. "That's so." Wyatt's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "Not because I need her," he said. "Because I choose it." Silence again. He didn't add more. Didn't explain Kansas. Didn't defend. Didn't ask for anyone's agreement. He just stood there. And that was enough. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the sheriff gave a small nod. Durney looked at Eliza once more, then stepped back. That was all it took. The room shifted again. Not warm, not welcoming, but different. Less sharp, less certain. Sadie let out a breath she'd been holding. Her hand tightened around Eliza's sleeve. They didn't stay long after that. Wyatt led them out the same way they'd come in. The sun sat low now. Light stretched long across the snow. The ride home was quiet. Sadie leaned against Eliza before they reached the ridge. By the time the cabin came into view, she had fallen asleep, her head resting soft and heavy. Wyatt slowed the horses, didn't wake her. When they stopped, he climbed down first, lifted Sadie carefully into his arms. She didn't stir. Eliza stepped down beside him. They stood there a moment. The cabin door just ahead. The same door, but not the same. Wyatt shifted Sadie in his arms, then nodded toward the house. Eliza walked first, up the steps, to the door. She paused there, just for a breath, then pushed it open. Inside, the fire still held from the morning. Low, waiting. Wyatt followed behind her. This time he didn't stop in the doorway, didn't block the wind, didn't stand between. He stepped inside, closed the door, and the latch settled into place without a sound. Outside, the snow had begun to melt at the edges. Near the step, small blades of green pushed up through the thinning frost. Hard to see unless you were looking. But they were there, and they held. Winter doesn't leave all at once out on the frontier. It loosens its grip slow, like it's not sure it's ready to let go. A little thaw at the edges. A little warmth where there used to be none. That's how it was for Wyatt. He didn't wake up a different man. He still rose before the sun, still worked with his hands, still carried the weight of what he'd lost. But somewhere between the silence and the choice he made, something in him had shifted just enough to let light in. And Eliza, she never asked for that light. She didn't come looking to be saved. She came as she was, with nothing but what she knew, what she'd carried, and what she refused to give up. That was enough. Maybe more than enough. Out here, a man can spend years building fences to keep the world out. But sometimes, it takes more strength to open a gate and let someone walk in without asking them to be anything other than who they are. So the question is, what would you have done? Would you have listened to the noise around you, or the quiet truth right in front of you? If this story stayed with you, there are more like it waiting just down the trail. Stories about people who lost their way and found something better than they expected. You're always welcome to ride along.